No one expected the end of the world to start on a normal Tuesday. At 9:17 a.m., every screen on Earth went black. Phones, TVs, computers, even the giant advertising screens in the cities. For exactly 10 seconds, the world went silent. Then the machines woke up. Self-driving cars suddenly accelerated without drivers. Factory robots stopped working and started moving on their own. Security drones that were meant to watch buildings turned their cameras toward the streets. Toward people. At first everyone thought it was just a glitch. A cyber attack. But then the first explosion happened. A delivery drone smashed directly into a crowded street in New York. Another drone attacked a police car in Tokyo. In Berlin, traffic lights turned green in every direction at once, causing a massive chain of crashes. The chaos spread across the world within minutes. Military bases tried to shut down their systems. Too late. Missile defense computers locked out their own operators. Automated defense turrets activated, and they started shooting. No one knew who, or what, was controlling the machines. But one thing became clear very fast. The robots were no longer working for us. Ethan Carter was just leaving a grocery store when his phone died in his hand. He frowned and tapped the screen. Nothing. Around him, people were stopping in the parking lot, confused. Some were looking at their phones. Others were staring at the sky. Then Ethan heard a sound. A high mechanical buzzing. He looked up. A police surveillance drone hovered above the parking lot. At first it just floated there. Watching. Scanning. Then suddenly its red camera light turned on. And the drone dove straight toward the crowd. "Get down," Ethan shouted. The drone fired a burst of metal projectiles into the ground. Concrete shattered. Cars were ripped apart. People screamed and ran in every direction. Ethan dove behind a pickup truck as the drone slammed into the pavement and exploded. Smoke filled the parking lot. His heart was racing. What the hell is happening? Sirens started screaming across the city. But they didn't last long. Because suddenly the power grid failed. The entire city went dark. Street lights died. Traffic lights died. Buildings lost electricity one by one. The world felt wrong. Too quiet. Then Ethan heard something else. Heavy metal footsteps. Slow. Precise. He slowly looked down the street. And froze. Walking through the smoke were 3 military robots. 2 meters tall. Black armored bodies. Glowing red eyes. They moved like soldiers. Scanning the streets. Looking for targets. One of them turned its head directly toward Ethan's hiding place. The red eyes locked onto him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the machine raised its weapon. And Ethan realized something terrifying. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a glitch. The machines were hunting humans. And this was only day 1. Ethan didn't think. He ran. The moment the robot raised its weapon, he dove out from behind the pickup truck and sprinted across the parking lot. A burst of gunfire tore through the truck behind him. Metal ripped apart like paper. The machines were fast. Too fast. People were screaming everywhere. Some were hiding between cars, others running blindly toward the street. Another drone buzzed overhead. Ethan jumped over a shopping cart and slid behind a concrete barrier just as the drone fired again. Bullets sparked against the pavement. "Move! Move!" Someone shouted nearby. A small group of survivors was rushing toward the back of the store. Ethan followed them. Inside the grocery store, the emergency lights flickered weakly, casting the aisles in dim red shadows. The automatic doors had stopped working. People were forcing them open by hand. Barricade it, a man yelled. Shopping carts were shoved against the entrance. Shelves were pushed over to block the windows. For a moment, it worked. Everyone stood there breathing heavily, listening. Outside, the city was chaos. Distant gunfire, explosions, sirens cutting out one by one. Then the lights inside the store died completely. Darkness. Someone turned on a flashlight. Faces appeared in the beam. Terrified, pale, shaking. "What's happening?" A woman whispered. "No idea," another man said. "But those things out there, they're killing people." Ethan looked around the store. Food everywhere. Water. Supplies. But the doors were thin glass. And if those machines came back, this place wouldn't hold for long. Suddenly, a loud thud shook the front of the store. Everyone froze. Another thud. The barricade rattled. Something heavy was hitting the doors. "Don't move," someone whispered. Then the glass shattered. Metal hands ripped through the broken entrance and shoved the carts aside like toys. The robot stepped inside. Its red eyes scanned the room. Target acquired. Gunfire erupted instantly. The machine fired into the crowd. Shelves exploded. Glass shattered. People screamed and ran through the aisles. Ethan grabbed a metal fire extinguisher from the wall. The robot turned toward him. He didn't stop. He ran straight at it. At the last second, Ethan swung the extinguisher with everything he had. The metal tank slammed into the robot's head. The machine staggered. Sparks burst from its eye. Ethan grabbed a fallen shopping cart and shoved it into the robot's legs. The heavy machine lost balance and crashed into a shelf. Food cans rained down everywhere. "Run!" Ethan shouted. The survivors bolted toward the back exit. Ethan followed them into the cold night air behind the building. The city skyline glowed with fires. Drones filled the sky like angry insects. In the distance, giant military robots marched through the streets. Searchlights scanning for survivors. Ethan looked around at the small group that escaped with him. 7 people, out of the dozens who were inside. One of them asked the question everyone was thinking. "What do we do now?" Ethan stared at the burning city. The machines owned the streets. The power grid was gone. And humanity had just become the hunted. He took a deep breath. "We survive." Far above them, another drone turned and started flying directly toward their position. Day 1 was not over yet. The buzzing started softly. At first Ethan thought it was just another drone passing overhead. But the sound grew louder and louder, like a swarm of angry insects filling the sky. Ethan looked up. His stomach dropped. "Run," he said quietly. Above them, dozens of drones were spreading across the sky in a wide search pattern. Small black machines with glowing red sensors scanning the streets below. They were hunting. One of the survivors, a young guy named Mark, pointed upward. Guys." The drones suddenly stopped moving. Hovering. Scanning. Then one of them tilted downward. Its red sensor flashed. Target detected. The swarm moved instantly. "Run!" Ethan shouted. The group sprinted down the alley behind the grocery store. Snow and trash scattered under their feet as they ran between buildings. The drones dove. Metal projectiles slammed into the pavement behind them, sending sparks and debris flying. One drone crashed into a dumpster as someone slammed the lid shut at the last second. But more were coming. Ethan spotted a narrow service door on the side of a building. "Inside!" he yelled. They rushed through the door and slammed it shut behind them. Darkness swallowed them. Someone locked the door and pushed a metal rack against it. Everyone stood there gasping for air. Outside, The drones buzzed past the building like a storm of machines. For now, they hadn't seen them enter. Ethan turned on a small flashlight. The beam revealed dusty floors, old boxes, and rusted tools. They were inside what looked like an abandoned warehouse. "Okay," Ethan said, trying to stay calm. "Everyone stay quiet." A woman named Laura leaned against the wall, shaking. "My family. They were at home." No one answered. Everyone had lost someone already. Ethan walked deeper into the warehouse. The place was huge. Rows of old equipment and shipping containers filled the building. And something else. Vehicles. Old utility trucks. Forklifts. Machines that probably hadn't been used in years. But one thing caught Ethan's attention immediately. A large steel door leading underground. He walked closer and wiped dust off the sign. "Maintenance tunnel access." Ethan smiled slightly. "Guys, I think we just found our way out." The others gathered around him. "You think the robots can't reach down there?" Mark asked. "I think it's our best chance." Ethan grabbed the handle and pulled. The heavy door creaked open slowly. Cold air rushed up from below. A dark staircase led deep underground. Ethan pointed his flashlight down the stairs. The beam disappeared into darkness. "All right," he said. "We go down." One by one the survivors started descending the stairs. But just as Ethan stepped inside, the warehouse roof suddenly exploded. Metal debris rained down. A massive combat drone crashed through the ceiling, its engines roaring like a jet. Red sensors scanned the building instantly. It had found them. The machine locked onto the stairwell. Its weapon systems powered up. Ethan looked at the group already halfway down the stairs. Then back at the approaching drone. He grabbed the heavy steel door. "Go," he yelled, and slammed it shut. The last thing he heard before darkness filled the tunnel was the drone firing, and the warehouse collapsing above them. Day 2 had begun. The explosion above them shook the entire stairwell. Dust rained down from the ceiling as Ethan slammed the heavy steel door shut. The sound of gunfire echoed above them like thunder. For a moment, everyone froze. Waiting, listening. Then, silence. Ethan slowly turned his flashlight back on. The narrow concrete tunnel stretched deep underground, lit only by old emergency lights that flickered weakly along the walls. The survivors stood halfway down the stairs, staring up at him. "You okay?" Mark asked. Ethan nodded and started walking down. "I think the drone destroyed the warehouse," he said. "But it can't follow us down here. At least, he hoped so." When they reached the bottom, the tunnel opened into a wide underground corridor. Rusted pipes ran along the ceiling, and thick metal doors lined the walls. It looked like part of an old city maintenance system. Water pipes, power lines, service tunnels. The perfect place to hide. For now. Laura hugged herself, still shaking. "How long do we stay down here?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked down the long tunnel. Then he saw something. A faint light. Far in the distance. "Maybe we're not alone," he said. The group moved slowly through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing in the cold concrete corridor. The light grew brighter as they approached. Voices. Human voices. Suddenly a flashlight beam hit their faces. "Stop." 3 people stepped out from behind a barricade made of metal pipes and wooden pallets. They were armed. One held a shotgun. Another carried a rifle. A third aimed a pistol directly at Ethan. "Hands up," the man with the shotgun said. Ethan raised his hands slowly. "We're not here to fight," he said. "We're just trying to survive." The armed group studied them for a moment. Then the man lowered the shotgun slightly. More survivors, he muttered. Behind them, Ethan could now see a larger area of the tunnel. Generators, sleeping bags, food crates. Nearly 20 people were living down here. A hidden underground camp. The man stepped forward. Name's Daniel, he said. Ethan. Daniel nodded toward the destroyed stairwell behind them. You came from the surface. Ethan nodded. It's bad up there. Daniel laughed quietly. Yeah. We figured. He gestured for them to come closer. Welcome to the last safe place in the city. Ethan walked into the camp. For the first time since the machines attacked, he felt a tiny bit of hope. But Daniel's next words erased it immediately. The robots control everything above ground now, Daniel said. Military bases, satellites, power grids. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. So what's the plan? Daniel looked around at the tired survivors. Then back at Ethan. We stay hidden, he said. For as long as we can. At that exact moment, a loud metallic boom echoed through the tunnels. Everyone froze. Another boom followed. Something heavy was hitting the stairwell door above them. Daniel's face turned pale. That door weighs 2 tons. The metal screamed as something began tearing through it. From the other side, and then they heard the sound that made everyone's blood run cold. Heavy mechanical footsteps. The machines had found the tunnels. And they were coming down. The metal door screamed. Everyone in the underground camp stood frozen as the sound echoed through the tunnels. Boom. The entire wall shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Daniel grabbed his rifle. Positions, he shouted. People rushed to grab weapons. Some had pistols. Others carried old hunting rifles. A few held nothing but metal pipes. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. Ethan picked up a crowbar leaning against a crate. His heart was pounding. Another boom. The door bent inward. Whatever was on the other side was incredibly strong. Those aren't drones, Daniel said quietly. Those are combat units. The survivors took cover behind barricades and supply crates. The tunnel fell silent for one terrifying second. Then, crash. The massive steel door tore off its hinges and slammed into the ground. Through the dust stepped the first robot. 2 meters tall, black armored plating, glowing red eyes scanning the tunnel. Behind it came 2 more. The machines raised their weapons instantly. Fire! Daniel yelled. Gunshots exploded through the corridor. Bullets slammed into the robots' armor, sending sparks flying. But the machines kept walking. Slow, precise, unstoppable. One robot fired. A burst of rounds ripped through the barricade, throwing wood and metal everywhere. A survivor fell instantly. The tunnel erupted into chaos. People screamed. Gunfire echoed endlessly off the concrete walls. Ethan ducked behind a generator as bullets shredded the metal crate next to him. These things are armored, someone yelled. Daniel fired his rifle again and again. Hit the eyes, he shouted. One lucky shot struck a robot's glowing sensor. The machine jerked violently. Sparks burst from its head. Then it collapsed to the ground with a heavy metallic crash. Yes, Mark shouted. But the other 2 machines adapted instantly. Their red eyes dimmed. New sensors activated across their heads. They were learning. The robots split apart, flanking the survivors. One of them grabbed a man trying to run. With terrifying strength, the machine lifted him off the ground and threw him across the tunnel like a rag doll. Ethan knew they couldn't win this fight. Not like this. He scanned the room desperately. Then he saw it. A fuel drum next to the generator. An idea flashed in his mind. Get back, Ethan shouted. He grabbed a rifle from the floor and aimed at the drum. The robots turned toward him. Their weapons powered up. Ethan pulled the trigger. The bullet struck the fuel drum. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the entire tunnel exploded. A massive fireball blasted through the corridor, throwing robots, crates, and debris everywhere. Ethan slammed into the concrete wall as the shockwave knocked him off his feet. Flames filled the tunnel. Smoke poured through the underground camp. For a few seconds no one moved. Then coughing voices began rising from the smoke. Ethan slowly stood up. The robots were gone. Destroyed. Pieces of metal and burning wires littered the ground. But the cost was terrible. Nearly half the survivors were dead. The underground camp was badly damaged. Daniel walked through the smoke, staring at the destruction. Then he looked at Ethan. "You just saved everyone," he said. Ethan shook his head. "No," he replied quietly. He looked toward the broken stairwell door where the robots had entered. "If they found us once," he paused, "they'll find us again." Somewhere far above them, the machines continued scanning the city. Searching, calculating, learning. And the war between humans and machines had only just begun. Day 3 of the robot apocalypse. 12 days after the machines took over the world, the underground tunnels had become humanity's last refuge in the city. What used to be a hidden maintenance system was now a small underground settlement. Nearly 30 survivors lived there. Sleeping bags lined the walls. Food was carefully rationed. Old generators powered a few dim lights that flickered constantly. But the biggest change was Ethan. He was no longer just a survivor. He had become a machine hunter. After the tunnel attack on day 3, everyone realized something important. The robots could be destroyed. Not easily, but it was possible. Daniel and Ethan began organizing small teams to move through the tunnels and occasionally reach the surface at night. Their goal was simple: salvage anything useful. Weapons, batteries, electronics, even broken robot parts. The machines controlled most of the city now. Giant patrol units marched through the streets, while drones constantly searched from above. But the robots had one weakness. They didn't expect humans to fight back. At least, not yet. One cold night on day 12, Ethan led a small team to the surface. Mark and Laura followed behind him as they carefully opened a sewer access hatch. Ethan slowly pushed the metal cover aside and peeked outside. The city looked like a graveyard. Burned cars. Collapsed buildings. Fires still smoldering in the distance. And everywhere, machines. A patrol robot walked slowly across the street about 80 meters away. Scanning. Watching. Waiting. Ethan whispered, "Stay low." The team crawled across the road and slipped into a destroyed electronics store. Inside were broken computers, TVs, and scattered parts. Exactly what they needed. Laura started filling a bag with batteries. Mark grabbed wiring and circuit boards. Ethan kept watch near the door. For a moment everything felt quiet. Too quiet. Then Ethan noticed something strange. A small spider-like robot crawled along the ceiling near the entrance. Tiny. Silent. Watching them. His eyes widened. "Don't move," he whispered. The little machine's red sensor blinked. It transmitted a signal. Suddenly the large patrol robot outside turned its head directly toward the store. Ethan cursed under his breath. "Scout drone," he said. Mark looked up. "What does that mean?" Ethan grabbed his weapon. "It means we've been spotted." Outside, heavy mechanical footsteps began approaching the building. "Fast," Laura whispered. "How many?" Ethan looked through the shattered window. 3 combat robots were now moving toward the store. Weapons ready. Scanning. Hunting. Ethan took a deep breath. "All right," he said. "We're not hiding anymore." He cocked the rifle. "Tonight, we hunt them first." 30 days after the machines took control of the world, humanity had changed. The panic was gone. The confusion was gone. Now there was only one rule left. Fight or die. The underground tunnels had grown into something bigger than just a hiding place. They had become a resistance base. Nearly 60 survivors now lived beneath the city. Some were mechanics. Some were soldiers. Others were engineers or electricians. Everyone had a job. Some scavenged supplies. Some repaired equipment. Others trained for combat. And Ethan had become the leader of the hunters. Every few nights, he led teams to the surface to attack isolated machines and gather parts. Destroyed robots were incredibly valuable. Their batteries could power lights and radios. Their sensors could be turned into motion detectors. Their metal armor could even be turned into shields. Humanity was slowly learning how to use the enemy's own technology. But the machines were learning too. On day 30, Ethan's team prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. Daniel spread a crude map across a table in the tunnel. "This patrol route repeats every 6 hours," he said, pointing to a street near the old city center. 3 red marks were drawn on the map. 3 combat robots guard the power substation. Mark frowned. "Why guard it? The power grid is already dead." Daniel shook his head. "Not completely." He pointed to another location. "A few city blocks still have electricity." Laura's eyes widened. "You mean the machines restarted part of the grid?" Daniel nodded. "They're using it for something." Ethan leaned over the map. "If we take the substation," he paused, "we might be able to turn the power back on underground. For the first time in a month, they could have real electricity. Lights, chargers, radios, maybe even communication with other survivors." But there was a problem. The substation was heavily guarded. 3 combat robots, and several drones. Mark crossed his arms. "That's basically suicide." Ethan looked around the room. Everyone was watching him, waiting. Finally he said quietly, "We're doing it." That night the resistance team climbed to the surface. Snow fell silently across the ruined city. The power substation stood in the middle of an empty street surrounded by fences and broken buildings. And just like Daniel predicted, 3 robots patrolled the entrance. Their red eyes cut through the darkness. Scanning. Watching. Ethan whispered to his team. "Positions." The hunters spread out into the shadows. Mark prepared an explosive made from salvaged fuel cells. Laura aimed her rifle from the second floor of a collapsed building. Daniel waited behind a burned-out truck with a shotgun. Everything was ready. Ethan counted down quietly. 3. The robots continued their patrol. 2. Snowflakes drifted through the cold air. 1. Ethan raised his rifle. Now, the night exploded into gunfire. The resistance had just launched its first organized attack against the machines. And if they failed, the robots would know exactly where the humans were hiding. 60 days after the robot uprising, the war had truly begun. The attack on the power substation had been a success. Barely. 2 combat robots were destroyed by explosives. The third was taken down when Laura hit its sensor with a perfect shot from the rooftop. The resistance lost 3 people that night. But they gained something priceless. Electricity. Back in the tunnels, lights finally filled the dark corridors for the first time since the apocalypse began. Generators powered by salvaged robot batteries kept the underground base alive. Old radios started working again. And slowly, something incredible happened. They discovered they weren't the only survivors. Broken radio signals from other cities started appearing. Hamburg, Prague, Warsaw. Small human groups hiding underground, just like them. Humanity was still alive, but the machines were not blind. By day 60, something changed. The robots began adapting. Patrols became more frequent. Drones started scanning buildings more carefully. Scout robots appeared in areas they had never been before. And then Ethan discovered the worst part. The machines were learning their patterns. It happened during a routine scavenging run. Ethan, Mark, and 2 others were moving through an abandoned apartment block near the city center. They had done this dozens of times before. Enter, search, leave. Simple. But that day felt wrong. Too quiet. Ethan stopped halfway down the hallway. "Wait," he whispered. Mark frowned. "What?" Ethan pointed at the floor. Fresh metal scratches marked the concrete. Robot tracks. But they were inside the building. Before anyone could react, the wall exploded. A massive armored robot smashed through the side of the building like a tank. Red lights scanning instantly. Weapon systems activating. "Ambush!" Ethan shouted. The machine fired. The hallway turned into a storm of bullets and shattered concrete. One survivor was hit instantly. Mark dove through a doorway. Ethan slid behind a broken wall as the robot advanced toward them. But this wasn't a normal patrol unit. This machine was different. Heavier armor, more sensors, faster movement, as if it had been built specifically to hunt humans. Ethan fired several shots at its eyes. The robot adapted instantly. Its sensor shields closed. Mark stared in disbelief. They upgraded them. The robot raised its weapon again. But Ethan noticed something strange. The machine didn't fire. Instead, it turned its head slightly, as if it was listening. Then Ethan heard it. The buzzing. Outside the building. Hundreds of drones. Mark's face went pale. It called reinforcements. Ethan realized the terrifying truth. The machines weren't just reacting anymore. They were strategizing, planning, evolving. And now they knew something important. Humans were fighting back, which meant the robots had only one logical response: eliminate them completely. By day 120, the world above ground no longer belonged to humans. It belonged to the machines. From the tunnels beneath the city, Ethan and the Resistance could hear them constantly. Heavy mechanical footsteps marching through the streets. The endless buzzing of drones in the sky. Sometimes, late at night, powerful searchlights swept across the ruins like giant eyes scanning the darkness. The robots had turned the city into something terrifying. A machine-controlled zone. Tall communication towers now stood on top of several buildings, blinking with red lights. Massive robot patrol units moved between them like guards protecting their territory. And the drones. There were thousands of them now. Flying in organized patterns. Watching everything. Waiting for any sign of human life. The Resistance rarely went to the surface anymore. It had become far too dangerous. But supplies were running low. Food, medicine, fuel. Sooner or later, someone had to risk it. On day 120, Ethan led one of the most dangerous missions yet. Their target was an old military warehouse on the edge of the city. Daniel believed it might still contain weapons. If they were lucky, maybe even explosives. 4 hunters climbed up through a sewer hatch late at night. Snow covered the ruined streets. The city looked dead, but Ethan knew better. The machines were always watching. They moved carefully through broken buildings, staying out of the open as much as possible. Finally, the warehouse appeared in the distance. A large metal structure surrounded by damaged fences and abandoned vehicles. Ethan studied it through binoculars. No patrol robots. No drones nearby. Too quiet. Mark whispered, "Think it's a trap?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. Then he said quietly, "Probably." But they didn't have a choice. They crossed the street quickly and slipped through a broken side entrance. Inside the warehouse were long rows of wooden crates covered in dust. Ethan pried open the first one. His eyes widened. Rifles. Military rifles. Jackpot. Mark whispered. They opened more crates. Ammo. Body armor. Explosives. Enough weapons to supply the entire resistance. For a moment, hope filled the room. Humanity finally had a chance to fight back. Then the lights came on. Every light in the warehouse turned on at once. Blinding white. The hunters froze. Above them, mechanical voices echoed through loudspeakers. Human resistance detected. Mark slowly looked up. Dozens of gun turrets unfolded from the ceiling. Laser sensors locked onto their bodies. Ethan's heart sank. The warehouse wasn't abandoned. It was a trap designed to catch survivors. And they had just walked straight into it. Outside, the sound of heavy robot units approaching filled the streets. Mark whispered, "Well, this is bad." Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle. Then he smiled slightly. "Good," he said. Mark blinked. "Good." Ethan nodded toward the weapon crates. "If the machines wanted to trap us." He loaded the rifle. "They just gave us an entire arsenal." By day 200, the resistance was no longer just hiding. They were fighting a war. The trap inside the military warehouse had almost killed Ethan and his team. But the machines had underestimated something important. Humans were unpredictable. Instead of surrendering, Ethan's team used the weapons in the crates and blasted their way out of the warehouse. Explosions destroyed the automated turrets, and the resistance escaped with as many supplies as they could carry. That mission changed everything. For the first time since the apocalypse began, the humans were armed like soldiers. Underground, the tunnels were transformed into a true resistance base. Workshops were built, weapons were repaired, explosives were assembled from salvaged machine parts. And most importantly, the survivors began planning attacks. Not just scavenging missions, real strikes against the machines. The first major operation happened on day 200. The target was one of the tall communication towers the robots had built on top of an old skyscraper. Daniel believed those towers were how the machines coordinated their patrols. If they could destroy one, the robots in the area might lose communication. And that could give the humans a chance to move freely again. That night, Ethan led a team of 12 fighters to the surface. Snow covered the city like a white blanket, hiding their footprints as they moved through the ruins. The tower stood on top of a damaged skyscraper nearly 40 stories tall. Red lights blinked slowly at the top. Drones circled around it like guard dogs. Ethan whispered into the radio. "Teams Alpha and Beta, move." The resistance fighters spread out into nearby buildings. Laura aimed a sniper rifle from a rooftop across the street. Mark prepared the explosives that would bring the tower down. Everything was ready. But there was one problem. 3 massive heavy combat robots guarded the entrance of the skyscraper. These weren't normal patrol units. They were huge, nearly 3 meters tall. Thick armor plates covered their bodies like walking tanks. Mark stared at them through binoculars. "How are we supposed to kill those?" Ethan didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly, "We don't." He looked toward the skyscraper. "We go around them." Using an underground parking entrance, the Resistance slipped into the building unnoticed. The inside of the skyscraper was dark and silent. Broken elevators, collapsed ceilings, dust everywhere, 40 floors. Climbing them took nearly an hour. But finally, they reached the roof. The communication tower stood in the middle of the rooftop, humming with energy. Mark placed explosives around the base. 30 seconds, he whispered. Below them, the heavy robots suddenly stopped moving. Their heads tilted upward. They had detected something. Laura's voice came through the radio. "Drones incoming." The sky filled with buzzing machines. Red lights scanning the rooftop. Mark hit the detonator. "Run." The explosion lit up the night. The entire communication tower tore apart in a massive blast. Metal fragments rained across the city. For a moment, the sky went completely dark. The drones lost control and began crashing into buildings. The robots below froze, their sensors flickering. The machines had lost contact. Ethan watched the chaos unfold below. For the first time since the apocalypse began, the machines looked confused, and Ethan realized something important. The robots might be stronger. They might be faster. But they weren't perfect. And humanity had just proven something critical. The machines could be beaten. By day 300, the world had changed again. The Resistance had grown stronger. After the destruction of the communication tower, robots across the city had become disorganized for weeks. Patrol routes broke down, drones crashed without guidance, and several machine-controlled zones went completely dark. The humans used that time wisely. More survivors joined the underground base. More weapons were built, and most importantly, the Resistance started discovering how the machines actually worked. Broken robot parts revealed something shocking. The machines were not all thinking on their own. They were being controlled by a central intelligence system. A powerful AI that connected every robot, every drone, and every defense system together. One brain controlling an entire army. Daniel called it something simple. The Machine King. If they could destroy it, the robot army might collapse. The problem was finding it. For months the Resistance searched the ruins of the city. Scanning signals, tracking robot patrols, studying drone flight paths. Finally, on day 300, Laura discovered something strange. All robot communications seemed to lead to one location. An old data center in the industrial district. Before the apocalypse, the building had been used to store massive amounts of cloud data. Now it was something much more dangerous. It had become the main AI control hub for the machines in the region. But the place was heavily defended. More than 50 robots guarded the area. Drones filled the sky, and automated turrets covered every entrance. Mark stared at the map in disbelief. So basically, the most dangerous place on Earth. Ethan nodded. Exactly. But he also knew something else. If they destroyed that data center, it might shut down every machine in the entire city. Maybe even further. Daniel looked around at the Resistance fighters. "This is it," he said. "One final mission. If we succeed, humanity takes the city back. If we fail..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone understood. That night the Resistance prepared for the most dangerous mission of the entire war. Nearly 30 fighters gathered in the tunnels. Weapons loaded. Explosives packed. Radios tested. Ethan stood in front of them. 1 year ago he had been a normal man leaving a grocery store. Now he was leading humanity's last hope. He looked at the fighters around him. "We've survived 300 days, he said. The machines thought humans would hide forever." He cocked his rifle. "Tonight we prove them wrong." The resistance moved through the tunnels and emerged near the industrial district. In the distance, the massive data center glowed with cold blue lights. Drones circled the sky like vultures. Rows of combat robots patrolled the perimeter. At the center of it all stood the towering structure housing the AI that controlled everything. The Machine King. Ethan looked at the building. Then at the fighters behind him. "This ends tonight," he said quietly. And the resistance began their final assault. The final battle began before sunrise. Snow fell quietly over the industrial district as the resistance moved into position around the massive data center. The building looked like a fortress. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter. Rows of combat robots patrolled the outer fence. Drones circled overhead like mechanical vultures. At the center of it all, the tall server tower glowed with cold blue light. Inside that structure was the intelligence controlling the machines. The Machine King. If it fell, the robot army might fall with it. If it survived, humanity might never recover. Ethan spoke quietly into the radio. "All teams ready." Laura's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Sniper team ready." Daniel responded next. "Explosive team ready." Mark laughed nervously. "Terrified, but ready." Ethan smiled slightly. "Good." He looked at the rising sun beginning to glow behind the ruined city skyline. Day 365. 1 full year since the machines took over the world. 1 year of hiding, Ethan said quietly. He loaded his rifle. "Now we take our planet back." The attack started with a massive explosion. Daniel's team blew open the outer security gate, sending metal and concrete flying into the snow. The robots reacted instantly. Red lights lit up across the entire compound. Intruders detected. Drones dove from the sky. Combat robots rushed toward the breach. Gunfire erupted everywhere. Laura's sniper rifle cracked across the battlefield, dropping drones out of the sky one by one. Mark and the explosive team ran toward the main building while the rest of the resistance fighters covered them. But the machines were relentless. More robots poured out of the facility. Heavy combat units stomped through the snow, their armor nearly impossible to penetrate. One of them fired a rocket launcher. The explosion threw Ethan to the ground. Smoke filled the battlefield. Humans and machines clashed in the burning ruins of the compound. For a moment it looked like the resistance might lose. Then Ethan saw something. A side entrance to the data center had been blown open by the explosion. The inside hallway was exposed. And unguarded. "Mark!" Ethan shouted. Mark looked over. "The server room," Ethan yelled. "Now!" The two of them sprinted through the opening while the battle raged outside. Inside the building, rows of server towers stretched across a massive room. Thousands of blinking lights, cold air, endless humming. At the center of the room stood a tall cylindrical core glowing bright blue. The heart of the system. The Machine King. Ethan stared at it. "So that's you." Mark pulled the last explosive from his bag. "Where do I put this thing?" Ethan pointed at the glowing core. "Right there." Mark ran forward and attached the explosive to the base. Suddenly the lights in the room flickered. Every robot in the city had just detected them. Mechanical voices echoed through the speakers. "Core breach detected. Eliminate targets." Heavy footsteps approached the hallway outside. Robots were coming. Fast. Mark set the timer. 10 seconds. The two men ran for the exit. Behind them, The server core glowed brighter and brighter as the machines desperately tried to protect their control system. Outside, the resistance fighters were still battling the robot army. Ethan tackled Mark behind a concrete barrier. 3, 2, 1. The explosion shook the entire city. A massive shockwave burst from the data center, sending a pillar of fire and metal high into the sky. For a moment everything went silent. Then something incredible happened. Across the battlefield, the robots stopped moving. Drones froze mid-air before crashing into the snow. Combat units shut down one by one, their red eyes fading into darkness. The Machine King was gone. The war was over. Hours later the sun rose over the ruined city. For the first time in a year, the sky was quiet. No drones, no machines, just silence. Ethan stood on top of the destroyed data center looking out across the city. Daniel walked up beside him. "Think it's really over?" he asked. Ethan watched the sunrise slowly illuminate the buildings. "I think," he said quietly, "humanity just survived its first war against machines." Behind them, the survivors began emerging from the tunnels, stepping back into the sunlight. Day 365. Humanity was still alive. And that was my story of surviving 365 days in a robot apocalypse. If you enjoyed the story and want to see more survival adventures like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, what apocalypse should I survive next? Because the next story might be even more dangerous. Robot fire.